Lauren Adams had built a life many envied. Her two-story home in the quiet suburbs of Portland sat nestled between rows of trimmed hedges and freshly painted fences. Inside, the walls were filled with laughter, toys, and framed memories. Lauren, a soft-spoken kindergarten teacher, had married her college sweetheart Eric nearly 10 years ago. Together, they had a 6-year-old daughter named Sophie, who was the light of their lives. Friends and neighbors saw them as the ideal family, the kind you'd invite to barbecues and holiday dinners. But what no one could see was the slow, unraveling happening behind the carefully drawn curtains. Eric worked as a financial advisor. He wore pressed shirts, kept his car spotless, and always had the right words to charm anyone he met. Lauren often joked that his real job was talking people into trusting him with their money. She never imagined he might use that same charm in ways she couldn't see. A few months before it all began, Lauren underwent surgery for a benign tumor. Though the procedure went well, recovery took time. With Sophie in school and Eric often at work, Lauren's mother, Diane, offered to move in and help out. It made sense at the time. Diane was energetic, capable, and adored her granddaughter. She had recently retired from her job as a librarian and said she missed being part of a full household. Lauren was grateful. Having her mother around brought a sense of comfort, until that comfort began to feel slightly off. At first, it was small things. Lauren noticed Diane spending a lot of time chatting with Eric. They often had coffee together after breakfast, sometimes lingering long after Lauren had gone back to bed to rest. One evening, Lauren walked into the kitchen and found them laughing over something on Eric's phone. When they saw her, the laughter stopped. It felt awkward, but she dismissed it. After all, they were family. Why should she suspect anything? Still, something didn't sit right. Eric began coming home later than usual. Diane seemed unusually interested in his schedule. Once, Lauren found an unfamiliar perfume scent on one of Eric's shirts, not hers, and certainly not Diane's usual kind. She tried to ignore the creeping thoughts in her mind. Paranoia, she told herself. Recovery was hard, hormones were out of balance, and maybe she was just imagining things. But deep down, a shadow had started to grow. The tension in the house became noticeable. Sophie began asking why her parents weren't spending time together like before. Lauren felt isolated in her own home, and every smile from Eric seemed practiced. Every kind gesture from Diane felt staged. She started writing in a private journal, trying to make sense of her emotions. The entries grew darker with time. She couldn't quite name the fear she felt, but she wrote about it anyway. A silent alarm ringing inside her. Then, one morning, she found Eric's phone buzzing on the counter. He was in the shower. Something told her to look. That was the moment. Everything changed. Lauren's hands trembled as she picked up Eric's phone. Her instinct screamed that something was wrong, but she didn't yet know how deep the betrayal ran. The screen lit up with a message from someone saved under the name M. Carter. The text was brief, but intimate. Too intimate. It read, "I miss you last night. Her being in the house is making this harder." Her heart pounded as she scrolled further. The conversation history revealed a trail of secrets that tore through the illusion of her marriage. Lauren's vision blurred, as the truth became impossible to ignore. Monsieur Carter wasn't a co-worker or friend. It was a cover name. The tone, the pet names, the detailed memories, all of it pointed to someone dangerously close. Then she saw a message referencing her own cooking and a joke about the garden. Gnome Lauren hates. Only someone who lived in the house could have written that. Her stomach turned. She dug deeper. cross-referencing the messages with dates, times, and even events she remembered. That's when the horrifying realization hit. The person Eric had been confiding in, flirting with, and seeing in secret was her mother, Diane. Lauren nearly dropped the phone. Her knees weakened, and she had to sit down. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps. Betrayal was one thing, but this was something else entirely. It was the destruction of every boundary she had believed sacred. She didn't cry right away. The shock numbed her. She stared blankly at the phone in her hand, reading the same messages over and over again, hoping somehow she had misunderstood. But the evidence was undeniable. They had been meeting in private, sneaking around the very house she lived in, and treating her as an obstacle rather than a loved one. She had welcomed Diane into her home to help her heal, and Diane had repaid her with the deepest form of disloyalty. Lauren didn't confront them right away. Instead, she printed the messages and hid them in her drawer. Over the next day, she watched their every move, seeing everything in a new light. The long glances, the subtle touches, the quiet whispers when they thought no one was listening. She wasn't imagining things. They had been in love, or at least in lust, right under her nose. By the evening, she couldn't hold it in. That night, neighbors heard shouting, loud enough to echo down the street. Though the words weren't clear, the emotion was unmistakable. Rage, heartbreak, betrayal. The argument lasted nearly an hour. And then suddenly, silence. The next morning, Lauren was gone. Eric told friends that she had left early to clear her head. He said she needed space. Diane confirmed the story, acting concerned but oddly composed. Lauren's phone was left behind. Her purse sat untouched by the door. Her car was still parked in the driveway. No note, no goodbye. Days passed. Her friends called. No one heard back. Eric told people she was on a retreat, but her social media remained quiet. Her bank accounts were inactive, and the police were starting to wonder if Lauren Adams had ever left the house at all. The days following Lauren's disappearance were filled with confusion and silence. At first, her friends assumed she needed time. They had heard about the heated argument and figured she had taken a break to escape the emotional chaos. But as days turned into a week, unease began to creep in. Lauren was not the kind of person to vanish without a word, especially not without contacting her daughter, Sophie, who meant everything to her. Concern turned into panic when Lauren missed her best friend's birthday, a tradition she never broke. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Her social media accounts remained untouched, and there were no purchases on her credit cards. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. Finally, her friends reported her missing to the police. What started as a welfare check quickly escalated into a full investigation. Detectives arrived at the Adams home and were met with polite cooperation. Eric explained that Lauren had chosen to leave on her own and that she was emotionally overwhelmed. Diane supported his version, telling officers her daughter had been acting irrational and distant for weeks. But investigators were immediately suspicious. Something didn't sit right. If Lauren had truly left of her own accord, why had she left behind her phone, her wallet, and her daughter? Why hadn't she contacted a single person? Police began digging. They searched Lauren's car and found no indication of a planned trip. Inside the house, everything appeared neat, almost too neat, as if someone had made an effort to scrub away the normal signs of everyday life. Her room was tidied. Her clothes were untouched. Her journal, which her friend later told police she always wrote in, was missing entirely. Suspicion deepened when neighbors came forward with security footage from the night of the argument. Cameras captured Lauren entering the house, but there was no footage of her ever leaving, not by car, not on foot, not at all. The timeline grew thinner, and the story Eric told began to unravel. Investigators requested a full search of the property. During the walkthrough, a young officer noticed something unusual in the backyard. The patio looked recently altered. A section of concrete appeared newer than the rest, the texture and color not yet blended in. When asked, Eric claimed it was a landscaping upgrade he had done earlier that week. The explanation was noted, but red flags were flying. A ground-penetrating radar was brought in. It was a routine step in missing person cases with suspicious circumstances. What the equipment found beneath the patio was anything but routine. The scan revealed a human-sized object buried just a few feet below the surface. The area was marked, and an excavation team was called. When they broke through the concrete, a foul odor emerged. Beneath the slab, wrapped in a large black tarp, was the decomposing body of Lauren Adams. Her hands were tied. Her skull showed signs of blunt force trauma. The body had been hastily buried, then covered with concrete in an attempt to erase her from the world. Lauren hadn't left. She had been silenced. And now the investigation was no longer about a missing person. It was a murder case. The discovery of Lauren's body sent shockwaves through the quiet neighborhood. What had begun as a missing persons case had now become a chilling homicide investigation. The sight of detectives swarming the property, forensics combing through, every inch of the house, and the backyard being torn apart left neighbors stunned and fearful. The image of the perfect family had been shattered in an instant, replaced with the dark reality of betrayal, lies, and murder. As the crime scene was processed, detectives focused on building a timeline and uncovering a motive. The autopsy revealed Lauren had died from blunt force trauma to the back of the head, consistent with being struck with a heavy object. Toxicology results showed traces of sedatives in her system, indicating she may have been drugged before she was killed. The murder had been methodical, not impulsive. Someone had planned it. Detectives turned their attention to the people closest to Lauren, Eric and Diane. Both were taken in for questioning. Eric maintained that he had no idea how Lauren's body ended up under the patio. He claimed she must have had enemies or mental health issues. Diane mirrored his responses, her voice calm, her face carefully composed. But investigators weren't convinced. The breakthrough came from Lauren's close friend, who provided a vital piece of evidence, a second hidden journal Lauren had been keeping. In its pages, Lauren had documented her suspicions about Eric and Diane's relationship. She had written about the secret messages, the late-night interactions, and her growing fear that something terrible was going to happen. She had even written that if anything happened to her, it would be because of Eric and my mother. That single entry turned the investigation sharply. Search warrants were obtained for both Eric and Diane's digital devices. When investigators combed through deleted texts, emails, and cloud backups, what they found was damning. Months of communication between Eric and Diane revealed an ongoing affair. They had discussed how their lives would be different if Lauren were no longer around. In one email, Diane wrote, "She'll never forgive us if she finds out, and she's getting close." In another, Eric replied, "Then maybe we need to think about what has to happen." The plan had been in motion for weeks. After Lauren confronted them, they realized their secret wouldn't stay buried. The argument that night wasn't just about betrayal, it was a breaking point. Investigators now believed Diane had prepared Lauren's drink with sedatives, Once Lauren was unconscious, Eric had delivered the fatal blow using a blunt object from the garage. Together, they had buried her in the backyard, poured concrete over the grave, and crafted a story of emotional distress and a sudden disappearance. With digital evidence, forensic proof, and Lauren's own handwritten warnings, police arrested Eric Adams and Diane Cartwright. The charges included first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and obstruction of justice. The community, still reeling, watched as two people who had once been trusted and loved were exposed as conspirators in a brutal and deeply personal crime. The trial of Eric Adams and Diane Cartwright drew national attention. The courtroom was filled with reporters, spectators, and a grieving community that struggled to understand how such a monstrous crime could have been committed by two people who once appeared so ordinary. The prosecution built a compelling case, laying out the evidence with surgical precision. Lauren's journal entries, the deleted digital correspondence between Eric and Diane, the forensic findings from the backyard, and the timeline that exposed their lies. Prosecutors argued that the murder was driven by lust, greed, and fear. Eric and Diane wanted to be together but knew Lauren would never accept their twisted relationship. Divorce was an option, but it would expose them, damage reputations, and possibly lead to a custody battle over Sophie. Instead of facing the consequences of their actions, they chose the darkest path, removing Lauren permanently. Their affair had not only been immoral, but lethal, culminating in a cold-blooded plan to kill the one person standing in their way. The defense struggled to maintain a consistent narrative. Eric's lawyers attempted to paint Lauren as mentally unstable, suggesting she had been unpredictable and emotionally volatile in the weeks leading up to her death. But this argument collapsed under scrutiny. Witnesses, including Lauren's co-workers and friends, testified that she was loving, stable, and concerned for her daughter's well-being. The sedative in her system, the blow to her skull, and the concrete grave painted a clear picture. Lauren hadn't left in distress. She had been ambushed and murdered in her own home. Diane's attorneys tried to distance her from the act itself, arguing that she was manipulated by Eric and had no direct role in the killing. But her own words betrayed her. The recovered emails and texts revealed her full awareness of the plan and a chilling lack of remorse. In one message she had written, "We just need to get through the next few days. After that, it's behind us." That line sealed her fate in the minds of the jury. After weeks of testimony, expert analysis, and heartbreaking statements from Lauren's loved ones, the jury deliberated for only a few hours. Eric Adams and Diane Cartwright were found guilty on all charges. At sentencing, the judge called the crime a staggering betrayal of trust and sentenced both to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Sophie, just 6 years old, when her mother was murdered, was placed in the custody of Lauren's sister, who promised to raise her with love and truth. As she grew older, she would learn the painful story of what had happened, but also the strength of the mother who had tried to protect her until the very end. Lauren's name became a symbol, not just of tragedy, but of the need to listen when something feels wrong, to trust intuition, and to never overlook the cracks beneath a perfect surface. In the end, justice prevailed, but the scars left behind would never fully fade.